Welcome to the Pursuit of the Perfect Race. I'm Coach Terry Wilson, and with each episode, I bring stories of athletes to you that share their experiences at races in order for you to learn how to have your perfect race. We will hear stories from athletes of all ages, abilities, and races of all distances. So regardless of where you fit in, there's something in it for you. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now let the pursuit begin. Race experience at IRONMAN Copenhagen, where he won the overall age group division in his age group with a time of 8 hours, 27 minutes, and 10 seconds. As being coached by the Honorable Matt Dixon, I was being coached by the Honorable Matt Dixon. This is his first year as a triathlete, and he's been running since high school. His first race on August 19th, 2018, and the total race day was 64, and it was a 72, and the swim was less than legal.
Thanks, Jerry. It's good to be here.
Awesome. So, what makes you into this placement?
So, I was actually originally planning just to do the half Ironman this year and move up to the full Ironman next year. But then in the middle of the season, my wife and I found out we were pregnant with our fourth kid, and she's due in September, which made going to South Africa for the 70.3 World Championships not an option. So we decided mid-season, after talking with my coach, Matt Dixon, that I would move up to the full Ironman and try to qualify for Kona. So I signed up for 2 full Ironman races prior to Kona to give me 2 shots at qualifying in case the first one didn't work. So those 2 races were Lake Placid and Copenhagen.
Wow. And you had a phenomenal day at Lake Placid, being the female pro there, Heather Jackson.
Right. It was an exciting first Ironman for me, and it was a very tough course. But I enjoyed the climbs on the hills, and overall we finished in 9:18 and was really happy with that as my first ever Ironman.
And then you just picked right back up and then over here
Yeah. Copenhagen was about a month later. And since I qualified at Lake Placid for Kona, I talked to Matt about, what do I want to get out of Copenhagen? And we decided that I would train through it and not really taper for it and just treat it as a really hard day of training since Kona is the A race. So that's what we did.
Wow.
I did. It was a 51-minute PR, but I guess it's hard to compare, course by course. Lake Placid had a lot of climbing, and Copenhagen was a relatively flat course. But it was still really exciting to PR by that much.
So being that you're just now getting into the sport of long distance Ironman racing, what's the driving force of why you want to do the sport in the first place?
Well, I've been a runner my whole life, and I ran in college, and then after college moved up to the full marathon distance, and I found that I was better at the longer distance stuff. However, I then took about 10 years off from running or any endurance sports and really just got back into it this past year. And I thought it'd be fun to try out the triathlon because it would, adding the swimming and the cycling, I thought would both make it more interesting, but also be easier on my joints as I'm getting older. I'm 39 years old now, so I thought it'd be good to do an endurance sport that had a lot of, where a lot of it was lower impact stuff like swimming and cycling.
Okay. So going into this race, what was your training like? Did you want to basically just take a step back from Copenhagen, but going like Placid? What was your training going into that race? Because this is like the tail end of Lake Placid, right?
Sure. So I basically just do whatever my coach, Matt Dixon, tells me to do. So I think I've been doing about 15 to 20 hours per week across the 3 sports, really leaning in on swimming. Recently, I've been swimming 5 days a week. That's been my biggest weakness, so it's the area I've been focusing on the most. Running is probably the thing I've been doing the least because it has historically been a strength of mine. So there've been not that many weeks where I've done more than 20 or 30 miles a week so far.
Wow. So going into this race and what's your longest swim workouts?
Well, let's see. The swim workouts, I usually just do 1 hour practices with the Masters team here in Cambridge, the Charles River Masters. So, we do somewhere between 3K and 4K during that time. I think I've done a few swim workouts where I've gone up to 5 kilometers, but not much more than that. For biking, the longest bike ride I've done so far was actually back in June. I went out to California to bike along the coast. I went there with a group from Zwift, and we started in San Francisco and biked all the way down to Malibu over 4 days. So in those 4 days, we covered 800K or 500 miles. I think our biggest day was almost 160 miles in one day. So that was pretty cool. Those were the longest. Pretty much every day of that ride was the longest ride of my life, and we did it 4 days in a row.
Wow.
In terms of the run, the longest run for me prior to Copenhagen was Lake Placid, doing the Ironman marathon at the end of that race. Other than that, I think I maybe did one 20-mile run and a couple of 16 or 18-mile runs. So, not too many long runs so far this season. Although looking back when I was running the marathon competitively, I used to regularly do 40-mile long runs every weekend.
40-mile long run.
Yeah, back in the day. My coach now says it's crazy that I did that and somehow didn't permanently injure myself. But I think back when I was training for the Olympic trials, I think I did 10 weeks in a row where my long run was 40 miles or more every single weekend.
Wow, so you have a mental toughness to be in for a really long time.
I guess you could call it toughness or, I don't know, insanity. Yeah, Matt has me do a lot of brick workouts. So oftentimes it'll just be a short run on the treadmill right after I hop off my bike trainer. I do pretty much all of my bike workouts indoors on Zwift. So, and I have a treadmill right next to my bike. So I'll just, even if it's just 20 or 30 minutes on the treadmill right after a bike workout, I'll do that pretty often.
Okay. Now, going into this race, you're training 15 to 20 hours a week, and I'm assuming going into that process is not the same. So as volume increases and intensity increases with your training, how are you mitigating the risk of being injured?
Yeah, Matt has been really good at making sure I don't get injured. I think back in the day when I trained by myself as a runner, I was pretty prone to injury because I think I would just do stupid things like those 40-mile long runs. And so Matt has made sure to not let me run too much. And by doing a lot more swimming and cycling, I think that's helped minimize the injury risk. The other thing that I am doing differently now than 10 years ago when I was a runner is I'm getting more sleep and also focusing more on nutrition, making sure I eat protein after every workout and just, really try to eat properly, sleep properly, and not do anything too crazy in my workouts. So I think a combination of all of that has, so far, knock on wood, prevented me from having any major injuries.
Wow. So going into like Wetsuit and Copenhagen, what workouts did you do that gave you the confidence to go into it better?
Yeah, it's really a combination of everything. But if I think about the run, for example, just doing a couple of longer runs, I mentioned 18 and 20 mile, a couple of those kind of runs at around 6:45 pace, as a training run just made me feel more confident when I was doing the run in the actual race that, I can do this and it won't feel too bad. My body can do this. Also doing some tempo run workouts where I do 6 miles at a much faster pace, like 5:25 pace. Also gave me confidence, especially in Copenhagen, where it was basically 4 loops, where each one was about 6 miles. I guess the first one was 8 miles, and then the next 3 were about 6 miles each. I would just tell myself, oh, this is just like doing a 6-mile tempo run 3 more times, but at a much slower pace. So that also gave me confidence on the running piece. In terms of the swim, my coach has had me do a lot of open water swim races. And again, since swimming is such a new sport for me, I really just started swimming last summer. Doing some of these open water races out here in the Boston area has really been helpful. Some 1 mile and 2 mile swim races. And then on the bike, I'd say that going back to that Zwift coast ride where we did 500 miles over 4 days, that gave me confidence on the bike, as well as I try to do one long bike ride on the trainer every week, where I'll just do at least 4 hours, maybe 5 hours on the trainer. And that gives me that confidence as well. Pretty much. In fact, I did 4 hours on the trainer the Wednesday before Copenhagen. And I was averaging, I think, about 250 watts or so, 240 to 250, I think 240 watts, during that trainer ride. It is kind of boring to spend that much time on a trainer, but I'll just watch a Netflix series or something to help the time pass while I'm doing that.
Wow. So if we take a look at your training, the 6 months of like passing Copenhagen, did you miss any training?
There were some times I took time off. For example, over spring break, I went to Taiwan with my 2 daughters and just basically took the week off. I've been fortunate that I haven't gotten sick so far, so I haven't had to take time off for that reason. But there have been times where I'll even just miss a day because I don't feel so good. And I find that it's not worth pushing myself when I'm feeling awful. It's better to just get some extra sleep and start tomorrow fresh. Now between now and Kona, I'm sure there's going to be some time I'll need to take off because we have baby number 4 due in the next few weeks. So when that happens, my coach and I have already talked about the fact that I'm just going to have to treat it the same way I treat, getting sick for a week and just say, let's put off the training and come back to it later. That's right. Wow. Make family and life the priority.
With your training going into all these races, were there any days where you just mentally didn't want to train, but you felt pretty good and you just mentally just couldn't wrap your head around it?
Yeah, I mean, there are some days where I mentally just don't feel like doing it. And sometimes what I'll do is mix it up a bit. Like I'll hop on the rowing machine just to do something different. And my coach has been really flexible with that and encourages that. And I think sometimes that's one way to kind of get over just that mental fatigue where you can still work out, but you don't feel like swimming, biking, or running. Other times, like I said, I'll just say, you know what, I'm just going to take today off because I just need some more sleep and I need to start tomorrow fresh.
Okay. So you're a father, a husband, and you're training 15 hours, 20 hours a week. Aside from traveling, being dad, being husband, what else do you have in your plate as far as life goes?
Yeah, so these days I'm working as a consultant for various internet startups, including Zwift actually, and another one is called Lime. They're an electric scooter company, and Change.org is another one. So I'm kind of doing some consulting and advising for these companies, also making some investments in these companies myself. So I'm not working a full-time job, which gives me the flexibility to train in this way. I'm able to kind of work from home and work around, kind of make that schedule work.
Wow. So how do you issue balancing life, work, and training for you?
I mean, it's definitely an issue as it is for everyone, but I find that what I try to do is every Sunday before I go to bed, just plan out the whole week in my calendar, and my wife and I share a calendar, and we just, basically plan out the whole week. So I'll have drop off, kids at school on these days, pick them up on these days. I put in my workouts from Training Peaks that Matt Dixon's put in for me. I put in any other meetings that I have, and I just try to make it all work. And by planning the week out in my calendar ahead of time, that really helps me manage all of it. And I also just make sure I don't schedule anything in the too late in the day or in the evening, so that I can make sure I get the sleep that I need to get.
Wow. It seems like time management is a big part of your life.
Definitely. I think it's the only way to make all of this work.
Right. So going into Copenhagen, what did you ever like?
So, as I mentioned when I spoke with Matt about this race, we decided that I wouldn't really taper much for Copenhagen. So I didn't have a super hard week leading into it, but I did do a 4-hour bike ride on Wednesday. I did a 1-hour swim actually on the course, swam the whole swim course on Friday. And, it was, I guess, just like an easier week of training, but not really a tapering week.
Okay. So when did you actually start traveling over to Denmark?
See, I flew out Wednesday night from Boston and arrived Thursday around lunchtime.
Okay, so a red eye?
It was a red eye. So we flew through Paris on the way out there. My brother came with me on the same flight.
Nice. So what is that came with you?
He came with me on the same flight, and then 2 other friends from college, guys I actually ran with in college, came out as well. So that was my 3-person support crew.
Nice. So,
Yeah.
as far as your bike over there, what kind of bike mods do you use in your bike over there?
Yeah, I have, it's a Thule hard case, which has worked pretty well for me. It definitely protects the bike. The only issue is, there have been a few times TSA has opened it up and, it hasn't put it back the same way they found it. And in fact, I was a bit nervous at the Copenhagen airport when I, went to get my bike at the oversized luggage place. The bike case had not been closed all the way. So the top was kind of hanging off, and I was like, oh man, I hope my bike's not broken here. But when I got to the hotel, I had a bike mechanic look at it, and everything looked okay. So
what kind of bike are you using?
it's a Trek Speed Concept.
Nice. Do you like it?
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, it's the only aero bike I've used so far, but I've been really happy with it so far.
Wow, so it's like a straight too. I got on back about 8 years ago now. It's been
Okay.
So over the years, I'm sure.
Okay.
It's crazy that you still have that was your first bike you have as first bike there as well.
That's cool. Yeah, I've been really happy with it.
Wow. So are you using ice wheels or anything like that?
Yeah, so I'm kind of new to all of this. So this is the first year I've competed and done triathlon seriously. So I don't know all of the details, but I ended up getting an aero jacket for my rear wheel. And then I got new tires for this race. I think they're Victoria Corsa speed tires, 23 millimeters, which a friend of mine recommended. Those were good ones. In terms of the wheels, whatever the wheels that came with the Trek were. So I think that was pretty much my setup on the bike.
Okay. Now, whenever you got there on Thursday, did you go ahead and take in when you got there, or did you just sleep? How was the jet lag? Did you have any?
Yeah. Well, I checked in as soon as I got there and tried not to go to sleep until the evening because I didn't want to sleep in the middle of the day and kind of get even more jet lagged. So my brother and I went out to lunch after we arrived, and then we just tried to stay up until dinner time, got an early dinner with the Ironman XC group that was out there. I raced just kind of along with the rest of the Ironman XC athletes, and then went to bed fairly early. And I wanted to try to get in a schedule where I'd go to bed early and wake up early. So I think I was in bed by 8 o'clock or so, maybe 9 o'clock.
So how was the check-in process for this race?
Check-in process was great. No major issues. Although, there was one issue with my bike, which I had to get fixed at the last minute. I noticed that my Di2 was not charged fully, so I charged it overnight. And then the next morning when I went on a ride, in the middle of the ride, the battery died again. And I think it's supposed to last I'm not sure how many thousands of miles before you need to recharge it a second time. So I thought something must be wrong with the battery. And fortunately, I was able to find a new battery to put in there, and that solved the problem. But I was afraid I was going to be stuck in one gear the entire race. Yeah, I was fortunate that worked out. I went to the bike mechanic at the expo, and they happened to have one of those seat batteries on them, and I bought that from them. So, and this was hours before the check-in deadline for the bike, so I was sweating to the bit. Yeah, a little bit for sure. Yeah. No issues with that. Yep. That was pretty simple. Trying to think, there were two different transition zones. This was the first time I was in a race where T1 was many miles away from T2. So we checked in everything at T1, including our T2 bags, and then they transported our T2 bags to the T2 zone.
So how far away is T1 and T2 apart here?
I can't remember exactly, but T1 was right by the lagoon where we started the swim. And then when we finished the swim, we hopped on our bikes, and I must have ridden several miles before we passed T2.
Okay. Now, as far as getting a rental car over here or traveling around the country, how does this work?
Yeah, I did not get a rental car. I just used taxis. The taxis were pretty convenient. Unfortunately, Uber was not available in Copenhagen, so had to rely on taxis. Although the day we left, there was a taxi strike, so had to wait extra long to get a taxi the morning before heading to the airport.
Wow. So as far as your nutrition plan while you're over there, what does this look like? Are you trying to get a certain type of calories in or type of meals in that will race? What does that look like?
I tend to eat a lot of carbs, kind of do the carbo loading thing. Again, I'm relatively new to all of this, so I just did the same stuff I did back when I was in college and back when I was racing the marathon, which is just eat a lot of pasta the night before and even 2 nights before. So seems to work for me. I know different people do it in different ways, but I kind of like getting a lot of carbs, and I just tend to eat a lot in general.
So
we stayed at the Copenhagen Marriott,
okay,
which was about a mile away from T2 or the finish line area, and several miles away from T1 where we started the swim.
Okay. Now, as far as getting to bed after the race, are you trying to get at a certain time?
I wanted to get to bed early. That was the plan, but there were so many things to get ready for the race. Again, since this is only my second Ironman, I think it probably took me more time than it takes someone who's done more of these. So I didn't get to bed as early as I wanted to, probably around 10 p.m. by the time I turned the lights off. And then I just, I don't know if it was just my nerves or jet lag or what, but it kind of felt like one of those nights where I was never fully asleep. I was kind of dozing, on and off, but I felt half awake the whole night. And also I knew I had to wake up early. The bus to the course was leaving at 5:15 a.m. from the hotel, and I wanted to make sure I got breakfast and everything. So I woke up at around 4 a.m. So didn't get a ton of sleep the night before.
So what breakfast are you going to get?
I ate some bowl of instant oatmeal, I think a bagel, and maybe like half a banana. I think that was pretty much it. Yeah, and a cup of coffee. I had a cup of coffee. Yep. Yeah.
As far as travel to the actual race course, just headed in there.
Yeah, we hopped on a bus, and my brother and two friends were out all night the night before, so they decided it'd be easier for them to stay up all night and hop on the bus with us than try to wake up and get on the 5 a.m. bus. So wow. they brought pillows on the bus and ended up taking naps while they were waiting for me to do a loop around the bike course and that kind of thing.
Jeez. That sounds like what my brother would do.
Yeah. That's right. So. It was their own version of an Ironman.
Wow. So you get the transition. What are you doing in transition?
So in transition, I first just made sure my tire pressure was where I wanted it to be, which for me, I put it at 95 PSI front and back. And then I put my little rice cakes that I had made into my bento box. My brother helped me make these rice cakes the day before, basically using some sushi rice. And some of them I mixed with scrambled eggs, and some I mixed with peanut butter, banana, and honey. And I was able to fit 5 of them in my bento box. And what else? I guess, yeah, once I made sure my bike was set up, I then went on a 10-minute jog, did a few strides, and then put on my wetsuit and went into the water, did 10 to 15 minutes warming up in the water, and then got out and kind of just waited for the start. By then it was getting pretty close to the start time.
Cool. A little bit about your race morning ritual. We talked about time management earlier. Do you have like a minute schedule of the morning of the race and what you want to do along the race morning?
A little bit. I'm still trying to figure it all out, but I knew we would. We got on the bus from the hotel at 5:15, and I think by the time we got to T1, it was probably 5:45. And the race, the pro men started at 7 a.m. and the rest of us started at 7:10 a.m. So I knew we had, close to, a bit over an hour by the time I checked to make sure my bike was set up right. So in that hour time, I felt like, okay, I've got the first 10 minutes, I'm just going to jog around and warm up that way, stretch a bit, leave some time to stop in the porta potty. And then after that, put on my wetsuit. And I think I wanted to make sure my wetsuit was on and I was ready to hop in the water by 6:30 or so. And that way I could warm up a bit before having to hop out and then wait for the professional men to start. And then I wanted to be at the front of the age group start. So I was kind of standing there towards the front, waiting for the 7:10 start time.
And the warm-up stuff that you're doing, do you have a certain type of warm-up that you like to do as far as hard strokes, easy strokes, kind of doing off of stroke count, or you want to get a little more? What is that look like? Yeah, my coach actually had a warm-up he recommended for me. So
I think it was like 30 strokes. Well, first it was just like warm up for 10 minutes easy, but then it was like 30 strokes moderate, 30 strokes easy, 20 strokes hard, 30 strokes easy, then 10 strokes very hard, 30 strokes easy, and do that twice. Something like that. I may be a little bit off there. Yeah, kind of like that. Just do that a couple of times. Just, to get, I find it's really helpful to just, even back in running as well, to do like a few like hard surges at a much faster pace than you're going to race at, because then it almost like tricks your mind into thinking that's what you're going to do. And then when you race at a slower pace, it feels a lot easier. You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. So I'd first jog to loosen up, but then I would do some strides at a faster pace, just to almost trick my muscles into thinking when they actually did run in the race, it would feel a lot easier than those strides I did before.
Wow. So you're sitting there in the marathon age groupers with everybody else. Do you recognize any of these people, or being that this is a country where some probably don't really speak English that much? So what is this like?
Yeah, I didn't really know anyone else at the starting line. And I just went in the furthest lane to the left and figured I'll try to go out hard, but I don't want to get stuck in the middle and get beat up by everyone else around me. But I just stayed pretty relaxed, just waiting for the start of the race. And I just told myself, look, I've got, at least 8, if not 9 hours ahead of me. So this really is a marathon, not a sprint, or it's an Ironman, not a sprint. So, in a weird way, that made me feel less nervous, because I felt like I just had more time and I didn't have to worry about like the first 30 seconds of the race. Cause even if I, did something a bit wrong in those first 30 seconds, that wasn't really going to matter. And I should just think about, I just want to make sure I finish this race. That's the most important thing, because there's so many things that can go wrong. Right. That can, cause you to have to drop out. I just want to make sure I get to that finish line.
Now, as far as your mindset going into this race, did you have any expectations that you put on yourself, or any type of goals that you wanted to achieve?
Not really. I went into the race with no expectations. And again, that was something my coach, Matt Dixon, made sure I did. He said, go into this with no expectations, just treat it like a long day of training, kind of the same way you treated Lake Placid. So far, that's been his advice for the last 2 races I did. Just treat it like a long day of training. Don't treat it like a race. And for me, I find that kind of reduces the stress if I just think about it as a long day of training, and without going into it with expectations. Then it's I feel like this is something I can do.
Wow. So I know you're fairly new with this swim, but do you feel like at some point your efficiency in the swim, if you really go all out in the swim, because you're so efficient and get out pretty refreshed, you don't really feel like you're doing all that, not wearing yourself out of the swim?
That was my goal, was to not ever push myself so hard in the swim where I would be tired by the time I hopped on the bike. I wanted to be as efficient as possible. And I'm getting better at that. I think my swim split in Copenhagen was 3.5 minutes faster than my swim split in Lake Placid. And I came out feeling pretty fresh. So I think I was under 53 minutes in Copenhagen. So I was pretty happy that I was able to do the swim in that time without being totally worn out.
Yeah. So the gun goes off with propane lead, and then you're sitting around waiting for your race to start. The gun goes off. Walk me through the swim course for you.
Yeah, the swim course was great. It was really just one big loop around the lagoon. And as I mentioned, I had actually swam the entire course 2 days prior as just a warm-up / workout. And I did that in 59 minutes on Friday. So I knew I could go faster than 59 minutes without it feeling too hard. So I just, I felt pretty relaxed during the swim and just, kind of got into the zone, and I went out a little bit faster than I knew I would want to hold for the whole, the whole swim, but just enough where I could kind of get away from the huge crowd. And then I just got into a steady pace, and there were a few other people who were also going at about the same pace, and we just kind of, it was the water was quite flat and almost felt like I was just in a big swimming pool.
Nice.
So it was really nice. It was a nice swim.
How was the water quality there? Did you see about that? Was it anything like plastic?
Oh yeah. It was quite clear, and I saw a lot of little jellyfish actually. Really? I wasn't sure if I was hoping they weren't the kind that could sting you. I didn't get stung though, so I'm sure it was they were safe. But yeah, you could actually see quite clearly, and there were certain parts of the swim where you could see the ground and where it got pretty shallow.
Wow. So you got out of the swim. Did you realize where you were as far as in the race itself, or were you really paying attention to that, or were you just in your own limit?
I looked at my watch and saw that it was around 53 minutes, and so I felt good about that, but I didn't know where I was in terms of overall place. But I just thought, okay, I did what I wanted to do. Now I'm going to hop on the bike and just do what I, can do there. And it wasn't until I started passing people on the bike that I started to get a better sense of my overall position.
Okay. Now, as far as T1 goes, was it there? Did they have wetsuit strippers, or did you have on your own? Was this one?
There were no wetsuit strippers at this one, so I had to do that part on my own. And in my T1 bag, I left my helmet and my bike shoes in the bag. And I was planning to put on my helmet, then run with my bike shoes in my hand all the way to my bike, which was all the way at the other end of T1, kind of right by where we mount our bikes. So I thought, okay, I'll just run barefoot with my shoes in my hand and put them on at the very end. But as soon as I started to do that, someone said, no, you've got to put on your shoes. You can't run with your shoes in your hand. So I had to put my shoes on and run in my bike shoes, which was a little bit annoying, and made me think for the next one, I want to learn how to hop onto my bike with the shoes already clipped in, because people that had already clipped their shoes in were able to run barefoot. And that was one learning experience for me in this race.
Wow. So as far as your strategy with the bike ride, did you have an idea of how you wanted to attack this bike ride from a power perspective or an RP perspective? What does this look like?
Yeah. So I wanted to, I looked at my power at Lake Placid and thought, okay, I can at least do that. Maybe I can go a little harder. And so I basically wanted to be somewhere between 260 and 270 watts as my average for the 112 miles. And I had actually gone on a best bike split the night before just to see, what might my bike split time be if I averaged about that power. And I think it told me I would do a 427. And my bike split ended up being 428, and I averaged 267 watts. I think that was my net power, which is about 70% of my FTP, which is about 380 watts.
Wow. So 380, and then you're running 260 to 270, and you're making the best bike split. So. Yeah,
I hadn't used it for Lake Placid, but then a friend of mine, Paul Gompers, recommended I try using it before Copenhagen because he was also racing Copenhagen. And so I put that in and put in the wind conditions and my weight and height and all that stuff. And it was surprisingly accurate, I have to say.
Wow. So are you looking at a 3-second average, a 10-second average, a normalized power on your screen?
Let's see. I have, I'm trying to remember if it's 3-second or 5-second average. It's one of those. And then normalized power as well. And then my top number on my Wahoo element is the heart rate. And that's actually the one I pay the most attention to. Because I've done some lactate threshold testing, and I know like what heart rate do I stay below that 2 millimole threshold. And so I kind of just wanted to make sure I didn't go above that threshold. And then I would try to make sure I'd kind of keep my power in that range of 260 to 270.
So you're looking at your heart rate to say, okay, I can push this hard, and as long as I'm pushing this hard below this heart rate, okay?
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
So
exactly.
What heart rate number are you trying to stay below?
I'm trying to stay ideally around that threshold point is somewhere between 140 and 150. So I feel good when I'm at 140. The closer I get to 150, the more I feel like, okay, I shouldn't let it get much higher than this. And then at times it was also below 140. When it would get into the 130s, I'd feel like, okay, I should really try to put in a little more effort than I'm putting in right now. So that was kind of the range.
So as far as the first 2 miles of the bike really go, how's this going for you?
The first few were feeling they were actually a bit harder than kind of the rest of the bike ride. So and my heart rate, I think because I'm coming out of the water and I'm horizontal in the water and everything, at the very beginning of the bike, I find my heart rate is higher. It's above even that 150 number. So I just wanted to make sure at the beginning, I kind of let my heart rate drop down back into the zone I wanted it to be in. But yeah, so it felt a little bit harder in those first few miles, but not too bad. And I was passing people kind of right at the beginning, some of the people that had gotten out of the water before me. So the other thing was the course in those first few miles was quite windy, going around downtown Copenhagen. So there was that added element of just making sure I was making all the turns and not falling off my bike.
Right. So how are your biking skills? Do you handle the bike pretty well?
Probably not great, because I do almost all of my workouts on my trainer on Zwift. So, I fortunately haven't had any accidents so far on the bike, but I think part of the reason I haven't is because I hardly am ever biking outside.
Wow. So as far as the first 2 miles of the bike really goes, how was the quality of the road?
Overall, it was pretty good quality. Yeah, there were some sections that were even better than others, but nothing that felt too bad. There were a couple of sections where we had to briefly go over some cobblestones. I remember that being the one part that didn't feel smooth, but those were literally just like less than a block, just short. Yeah. So.
Was there any no pass zones here?
I believe there were a couple of no pass zones. I can't remember exactly where there were, but they were pretty short.
Okay. So did you see a lot of officials out on the course, any penalties or any officials out?
I saw lots of officials. I don't remember seeing anyone actually giving someone a penalty, but there were definitely a lot of officials and volunteers out on the course.
Nice. So the aid stations here, did you take anything from the aid stations, or were you just on the water and ice chase? Was
I was pretty much doing my own thing. The one thing I did take from the aid stations was another bottle of water for the second lap of the bike course, because I had my water in my aero bottle between my aero bars. And so I had to fill that up one time with water from an aid station. I think I also grabbed half a banana at one point from an aid station. But other than that, it was my rice cakes and the 2 bottles of Osmo electrolyte solution.
Nice. So as far as the bike goes, are you going to have certain cadence or anything like that? Or are you strictly on whatever cadence it is?
Yeah, I wasn't paying too much attention to my cadence, but I think I was probably between 80 and 90 for most of the race. Probably closer to 90 than to 80. And maybe at some points a little bit above 90.
Okay. Now, as far as the miles after 70, 80, 90, are you entering any of the dark places of your mind of saying, I'm really ready to get off this bike, I've been here too long, I'm pushing hard? Are you entering any of these dark spots?
That didn't really happen for me in Copenhagen on the bike course. It did a little bit in Lake Placid during the second loop, but in Copenhagen, I actually felt quite good even in those last 10, 20 miles. The one thing I was paying attention to, I was starting to do calculations in my head, trying to see, okay, what's it going to take to break 4:30, and am I going to be able to get a bike split under 4:30? So I knew I was going to be close to that. So that was that actually was more motivating to me than trying to compete with other people on the course, because I was pretty much on my own the entire time. In the second lap, there were tons of people that I was riding by who were on their first lap. So I wasn't all alone, but there was no one else I was really biking either behind or who was biking behind me. So I kind of had to just pace myself based on the power stuff, the heart rate stuff. And then towards the end, it was more, it was kind of like playing a game of, can I break 4:30? Yeah, exactly. It gave me something to do. I was like, okay, if I'm going about 25 miles per hour, then, that means in half an hour, I go 12 and a half miles. So that means when I hit 4 hours, I want to hit 4 hours at, 3 hours, 59 minutes and 30 seconds or less, so that I can, I'm not sure if I just did that correctly. Sorry, that's not what I meant to say. I want to hit 99.5 miles at 4 hours flat, because then I can do the next 12.5 miles in half an hour.
Wow. That's crazy. I can't do that on that level that fast. So, did you use this special needs to your role, or did you just simply have this on record?
I did not use special needs on the bike course or the run course.
Okay. Now, as far as the bike goes, what's something that you would tell someone to be aware of that hasn't done this bike course before?
Well, one thing is that the streets at the beginning are pretty windy. There are quite a few turns. So just be careful as you're biking through downtown Copenhagen. What else? But once you kind of get out of downtown, it's a really beautiful ride along the coast, and then on the way back through the countryside, with some rolling hills, but nothing too difficult. There are a couple of climbs towards the end of each loop, but those also were, I don't think anything to be afraid of. So I would just say, my advice would be, just like any other race, make sure you pace yourself well, and just don't ever, it's a long time to be out there. So make sure you're going at a pace that you can maintain for that long. But if you do that, there were no big surprises, and I think you'll be fine. Yeah. Right. I want to just make sure I was hydrated, so I made sure to kind of finish my drinks, my sports drink and my water. I wish I had actually gotten a little bit more water because I ran out of water towards the end. And so I did that. I tried to increase my cadence a bit because I've been told that it's good to kind of go at a higher cadence towards the end of your bike to just get your legs ready for that turnover on the run. But yeah, that was about it. Okay. So there was a volunteer to take the bike. T2 was actually in this underground garage. So we biked down this slope into a garage and then I handed my bike to a volunteer, ran to find my bag and quickly put on my socks and running shoes. I wasn't wearing socks on the bike portion. Put on a hat and sunglasses. And then I also took a quick stop in a porta potty just to pee before beginning the run. Did that in T2 as well.
Wow. So you get on the run. What's the first moment like there?
Well, the whole run was right there in downtown Copenhagen. So that was really cool to just be in the downtown area. They closed off all the streets. There were tons of spectators, lots of energy. So it actually, the first couple of miles of the run felt great. I think I was going I was trying not to go out too fast because I learned in Lake Placid, even though I felt good at the beginning, I probably started the run a little too fast. And so I think I hit 6:30 mile pace for the first couple of miles. And I thought, okay, that's faster than I should be going. And I tried to pull back a little bit, but I felt great for those first few miles, even, hitting 6:30 mile pace.
Wow. Did you have a strategy what you wanted to hit versus what you were actually hitting?
Yeah, I went into the race hoping I could break 3 hours for the marathon. And I knew that meant averaging around 6:50 per mile pace. But I also felt like it would be good to do my first few miles faster than that because I knew my last few miles would highly likely be slower than that. So I was okay with doing those first few miles at 6:30 pace because I just I knew I needed to bank some time at the beginning to make up for slowing down at the end.
So you banked about that first 3 or 4 miles?
Maybe a minute and a half. And then I just got into the steady pace where I was hitting 6:45 per mile, on the dot, maybe plus or minus 1 second, for I don't know, probably 8 miles in a row, something like that. I was just, or maybe even 10 miles, just going at that pace. And then it was really the last 10 miles where my times were starting to get slower at each mile. It was, as I mentioned before, it was 4 loops. And I just kept thinking with each loop I did, okay, this is just one more 6 mile loop. I can do that. I know I can do a 6 mile loop. But my pace did, get slower and slower with each loop I did.
So you mentioned something about the purpose of the ride earlier.
Yeah.
On the bike. Where did this come in?
It was really for me the last 6 mile loop, and in particular the third to last mile of the run was by far my slowest mile. I think I hit 8-minute pace at 1 mile. But all of my other, it was really, this time it was just that 1 mile. Whereas in Lake Placid, I'd say it was like my last 6 miles, maybe even 10 miles felt that way. But in this case, it was like that 1 mile. And then I thought, okay, now I just have 2 more. I can do that. And I picked up the pace for my second to last and last mile. So the dark spot was much shorter this time around. And I also, for the first time, started trying to use Coca-Cola in that last lap. So that last 6 miles, at every aid station, I would drink some Coke. And the sugar and caffeine there, I think did help.
Nice. So, how long in that last 6 months did you have Coke?
Well, I was talking to Tim Don before the race, like the day before the race. He was staying at the same hotel as I was. And I just asked him about Coke, and he said, it's great, but just don't use it too early. And once you start using it, don't stop using it. And so I felt like, okay, kind of those last 6 miles seems like a good time to start using it. And once I'd started that, at every aid station I went to, I would drink a small cup of Coke.
Okay. Now, were there any hills on this run course?
Not much. It was overall pretty flat. There were a few short inclines, like when we go up over a bridge or something like that, but it was no. It was overall a very flat and fast course. I think for me the hardest part was the sections on cobblestone, just because of the uneven surface. There were quite a few parts of the course where we had to run on cobblestones. So that was the only part I didn't especially like, but it was pretty awesome, just like running around the downtown area, having all the crowds out there. And then each time we would do a loop, there was someone who'd put a colored band around our wrist. And so each of the 4 loops had a different color. So you could kind of remember which lap you were on in case you forgot, I guess, or see other people and know which lap they were on.
Nice. So when we checked into the race, did you get some of these red bracelets to give to volunteers?
I don't remember getting one this year, or in this particular race. So I don't know if I just missed that, but I know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. I didn't get one though, at this race, but I did get those 4 bracelets doing the run course. And when I came home, I gave one of them to each of my 3 kids, and then the 4th one we're saving for when the 4th baby's born.
Nice. So, as far as the course itself, did you see anything funny on the course?
Did I see anything funny? Let's see. I mean, there were. I saw another runner who stopped and went up to one of the spectators, which I assume was his girlfriend or wife, and just gave her a big kiss. I thought that was pretty funny, or interesting. I'd never seen that happen in a race before. And then he went back to running. I'm trying to think of what else I saw. I mean, there were lots of different parts of the course where they had music playing and bands playing and that kind of thing. I don't think I can't remember anything that was especially funny, but it was just a really cool, energetic scene.
Wow. Now, mentally, how hard was this race for you? I mean, you seem like you're in really good shape, and you had to dig quite a bit to get this kind of performance out of your body. So how hard was this for you?
It was definitely hard. I mean, especially those last 6 miles of the run. I guess I don't know exactly how to explain it, but because it's such a long race, I feel like it didn't actually feel that hard until the end, because I was just trying to pace myself and treat it like a long training day. So I kind of knew that the pain was going to come, but there wasn't a whole lot of pain until those last 6 miles, I'd say.
What if you knew this pain next week? Did you want to stop and walk anymore?
I did feel like it, but I also, again, I was like doing the math in my head thinking, I think I can break 3 hours and I'm going to regret it if I don't. And I knew I was pretty close, so I didn't have too much time to stop and walk. So the few times I did stop were in that last loop at each of the aid stations. I would stop for like 2 seconds to drink the Coke and then start running again. But I didn't want to stop for too long because I didn't want to look back and say, oh man, I could have broken 3 hours, but I, spent too long stopping at that aid station.
Wow. So the last 8 years of the right course, how was this?
Oh, by then I knew how close I was to the finish line. So I actually suddenly felt a lot better because I knew I was so close to finishing. And, the last 2 races I did, the Lake Placid Ironman and the Mont Tremblant 70.3, I actually misjudged the finish line of the race in Mont Tremblant. I actually kept running after I passed the finish line, and someone had to stop me and say, you're done. And in Lake Placid, I stopped before I hit the finish line. And then I saw someone saying like, no, you got to keep going. You're not done yet. So this time I was like, okay, I made sure before I started the race, I knew where the finish line was. and I gave people high fives, on either side of along the chute before I finished. And, when I crossed the finish line, my brother was there to put the medal around my neck, and my friends, John and Alistair, were there too. I gave them, I gave everyone hugs. And then, this other guy was there, and he gave me a bottle of water, and he said, I'm going to stay with you until we do your drug test. So just let me be here to chaperone you. You can go get a sports massage and do whatever, get some food, but then we need to go take you down for drug testing. So that was a first for me. So I got a quick sports massage and got a hamburger, and then went down and they had me do a drug test along with, I think several of the top pros, and I think a couple of other amateurs as well, were drug tested.
Is that just like a pee in the cup thing, or
what does that look like?
It was pee in the cup. Yeah.
So, really kind of went into what you went into afterwards. So, how was your recovery process since the race?
It's been pretty good so far. The race was, I guess, exactly a week ago. And so far I've been feeling good. I went on a 10-mile run yesterday. And, well, the day immediately after the race, I got on a bike ride. I got in a swim as well. And so I feel like so far I've been feeling pretty good. Although I remember after Lake Placid, it was 2 weeks after the race that I felt kind of more fatigued than 1 week after. So I'm wondering if I'm going to feel more fatigued next week than I did this past week.
Wow. So as far as the award ceremony the next day, you went to that and got your award and had some fun at the award ceremony. How was this?
That was cool. It was a fun award ceremony. They were playing music after each award that they announced, and it was fun to be a part of that.
Wow. So what's it like from an experience of being the first amateur athlete to cross the finish line?
Well, it's a cool feeling, but I know I have a lot more work ahead of me, you know, and this is just one race. And I'm now looking forward to Kona, which is less than 2 months away. And I know there are going to be a ton of really talented and experienced amateur athletes in that race. And so while I was excited and happy with the outcome in Copenhagen, I realize I still have a lot to learn and a long ways to go. And my coach constantly reminds me I'm still at the very beginning of this journey, and that I need to continue to be humble and not take anything for granted. And I need to continue to respect the Ironman race, because literally anything can go wrong on any day. And so I'm excited about Kona, but also a bit nervous about it, especially hearing how hot it is and how the course can get really windy. So I'm kind of going into it this year as a learning experience. I'm just going to, again, hope to go there and cross the finish line. I'm hoping that nothing will go wrong on race day that prevents me from finishing.
So anyway, you came in first, you took yours out to Kona next year.
I don't know. I don't think that was an option. I have my slot for this year, which I got in Lake Placid. But I haven't really figured out next year yet.
Because I think Lake Placid is the last one for the qualifying for 2018. And
really? Okay.
After Lake Placid, everything started going to the 2019 slot.
Oh, my understanding was Copenhagen gave out slots for 2018 as well.
Okay.
So maybe it was right on the edge, but I'm pretty sure the people that got Kona slots in Copenhagen were going there this year.
Okay. So what's it that you learned from this race experience that you don't want to pass on to someone who hasn't done this race before?
Well, I mean, this is one thing that my coach has told me for the past 2 races, but I think it's been great advice, and it's advice I'll give to anyone else, is go into the race and treat it like a long day of training, and go into it without any expectations and just train really hard all day long and see what happens. So that's been good advice from Matt, and I think that's how I'm going to continue to approach these races.
That makes sense. Now, looking back on it, how prepared do you think you are for this race?
I guess I must have been pretty well prepared, because I had a big PR and I went faster than I thought I would be able to go. So I think I was probably more prepared than I realized I was. But I just am continuing to do the training that Matt and Purple Patch Fitness are giving me. And I just trust that I 100% trust my coach and the Purple Patch program. And I feel like I can then go into these races feeling fully prepared, and it's nice because I don't have to really worry too much about it. I can just believe that I'm ready.
Right. So for those that don't know what Purple Patch really means, it's basically a streak of good success.
Yep.
A lot of people don't know that's what Purple Patch really means. And I learned that the other day when I interviewed Laura, and I was like, wow, that just makes sense.
Totally. Yeah. No, it's a cool name.
So, how made your race experience here in Copenhagen better?
Oh gosh, I mean, it was great. I can't really think of how they could have made it any better. I overall it was it was just such an amazing experience, and the race was just put together flawlessly. The course was beautiful. There were tons of volunteers out there. I can't really think of anything I would have wanted to be done differently. Yeah.
Logistically, was this complicated for you to race here?
It was a little bit. It was my first time racing internationally, so I was a little bit worried about the time zone differences and being jet lagged and getting my bike overseas. The other thing that happened on my way back was the airline told me, "Oh, you didn't reserve a spot for your bike case on this plane." And I almost wasn't able to fly back on my flight because I hadn't reserved a spot, but they were able to, at the last minute, get me a spot. I didn't realize that was something you had to do. This was, I had booked through Delta, but flying back, I think it was, was it SAS or no, it was one of the other airlines, but apparently all of the European airlines ask you to do that when you're flying from Europe. Yeah. So that was something that I was a little bit concerned because, my wife is getting so close to giving birth, and I didn't want to be gone another day.
Right.
She was afraid she was going to have the baby while I was in Europe.
Oh, wow. So we covered a lot. Do you have anything else to add about your race?
Nothing I can think of now. I think we've covered most of it. So I really appreciate you having me on your podcast. It's been fun talking to you.
You're welcome. So just to wrap up here, we know you're doing Kona. I'd love to have you back on after Kona to hear about your first time racing Kona. I'm trying to put up my series of Kona and having a first time there. It'd be really great to hear your experience.
Awesome. Would love to do that.
Awesome. So either you just got into triathlon, I know you're a native runner, kind of like myself. What races are on your bucket list?
Good question. I don't yet have a plan for the races I'm going to do next year, but I would love to do an Ironman in China at some point. My kids all speak Mandarin Chinese, and
Really?
they do, yeah. So it'd be fun to try to do a trip out to China and race while I'm out there. And I was also thinking of maybe doing the Oceanside 70.3 next year, which happens to coincide with my birthday weekend. And just kind of do that as like a birthday race. I turned 40 that weekend.
Wow.
So those are, so far that's my thought process, but I'm going to spend some time soon talking with Matt about races for next year and figure out the plan.
So if people want to follow your journey, how can they follow you?
Oh yeah, so I'm on Instagram. My Instagram name is uber.ed.baker. It's UBER. I used to work at Uber, so that's where the name comes from. That's probably the easiest way to follow me.
Okay. Well, I just only have one more question for you, Ed, and it's, what's your definition of a perfect race?
Perfect race. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is one where you cross the finish line. I think that's the first thing that needs to happen in a perfect race. But I'd say it's also just one where when you cross that finish line, you feel like you've put everything into it, and you feel like there weren't any, huge obstacles that you weren't able to overcome. I think for every person, it's different, but I think you kind of just like have that feeling after the race where you feel like I did what I set out to do here, and there weren't any huge obstacles that got in my way. So I don't know, that may be kind of a generic answer, but I really do think crossing the finish line, that alone, like especially in a race like an Ironman, like if you've finished an Ironman, almost no matter what happens, you should be able to call that a perfect race. And some people would say even just starting an Ironman is enough. So I have a lot of respect for all of the people out there that do these races and have done a lot more of them than I have, or maybe ever will. And it's just really inspiring to see all of the stories out there of the different people that have done this. It's really cool.
Wow, that's great. Well, thank you so much. I look forward to following your journey and have you back on North Dakota. And we'll talk soon, okay?
Awesome. Thanks so much, Terry. Have a good day. Okay, you too.
Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you were able to learn something from today's episode. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to leave a review on iTunes or share it with a friend. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you'd like to see pictures from this athlete's race, learn more about who I am, what I'm doing, or be on the show yourself to share your story, check out my website at CoachTerryWilson.com. Until next time, continue the pursuit.